Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to Victimology Chapter 5. Now, this chapter is all about looking at victims' rights. And we first start out by looking at the common rights given by the state to victims. It starts out with the right to notification. This could be about anything happening with the trial, the offender, anything like that. Then we get to right to participation and consultation. The right to protection, this one's big because a lot of victims feel scared that if they go to the criminal justice system, that they will be targeted by the offender or anyone the offender knows, like their family or friends. They're also guaranteed the right to a speedy trial. I know that a lot of times that seems like that's something for the offender, but it's also for the victim as well. And then lastly, the rights to related evidence. Now we're going to get into issues with victims' rights, and this kind of gets tricky because the Constitution doesn't provide anything about victims' rights, and so that's an issue a lot of people see down this route. And it also isn't, victims' rights can also be an issue because like focusing on the victim and what you can do to help them, a lot of people think that that will burden the already overburdened criminal justice system and kind of keep flooding the system. Next, this chapter gets into federal law. Now, there are quite a few examples of these throughout the year, so I'm going to highlight the most important ones from this chapter, starting with the Victims Witness Protection Act from 1982. Now, this made it possible to hand down any sort of punishment for someone who tampers with any witness, victim, or informant. So this is key because a lot of times, like I said earlier, victims are scared to go to the police because they think retaliation is going to come. Now, with this Protection Act, it might make them feel a bit safer, and it also made sure that no official would give anyone else the names of any informants or give them their addresses as well. Next, we get into the Victims Crime Act, and this kind of brought about the Crime Victims Fund, and it was amended in 1998, and it kind of made sure that the states provided support systems for victims of drunk driving or domestic violence as well. Then we get into the Child Victims Bill of Rights, and this, it's kind of self-explanatory. It provided rights to child victims. Then we look at the Violence Against Women Act, and what this did is it gave about $1 billion to programs that are designed to respond to violence against women. And this is also really important because it established the National Sex Offender Registry, and that's a big part of everyday life today, helping people be aware of people that could possibly be in their neighborhood or their area. That way they could protect potential victims. Then we get into the Victims' Rights Clarification Act, and the big thing about this is it provided rights to victims that want to give a victim impact statements during any sort of sentencing or parole hearings. Now we look at the Violence Against Women Act of 2000. Now, this is important because it brought about funding for rape prevention and education, battered women's shelters, and transitional housing for female victims. It also addressed the concern for violence against older women and those with disabilities. Then this chapter looks at, in my opinion, probably one of the more important acts of the chapter, the Violence Against Women Act of 2013, which requires universities to report any instances of domestic violence and also implement programs to prevent that from occurring, as well as to provide resources to the victims for things like mental health and counseling and stuff like that. This chapter wraps up by going over restitution, which is what the offender pays the victims in terms of monetary value. Looks at civil litigation, which is when the victim sues the offender and takes them to civil court to go over any monetary compensation for emotional damages done to them. And it also looks at victim offender mediation programs. Now, this is when a victim and an offender can sit down together. They could also have support system, like each person could have their families involved and stuff like that, and they each talk it out. That way the victim can get out what they need to get out, and the offender can also see what kind of harm they had done to that person. And there's also a mediator that kind of guides them along this process, but that has been found really useful and can help deter future victimization for both the offender and the victim. Thank you, and that is it for Chapter 5.